Hello, YouTube Reloaders. Thanks for watching. Hornady Loader here. My standard disclaimer, I am not an employee of Hornady Manufacturing, nor do I have any interest, financially or otherwise, in the sale of Hornady products. I've been reloading for almost 35 years, and for the last 20 years I've been using Hornady equipment almost exclusively, hence the name Hornady Loader. The Hornady logo is a registered trademark of Hornady Manufacturing, Grand Island, Nebraska. Today's video will be an examination of the Hornady Power Case Prep Center. Now I realize there's already several videos out about this particular piece of equipment, but if you hang in there, I think you'll find that there's information in this video that you won't find anywhere else. Now the Power Case Prep Center combines both functions of case preparation. First, on the top is case trimming. On the bottom are the case preparation tools for chamfering, deburring, and so on. Now at the top of the Case Prep Center, you'll find the adjustment handle. The adjustment handle moves the spindle carrier, this here, up and down, allow you to adjust the length of your cases. The spindle carrier, of course, holds the spindle, at the bottom of which is the cam lock mechanism. This holds the shell holder in place where you insert your case. If I can do this one-handed, there we go. Okay. And at the top of the spindle is the plunger handle. You depress the plunger handle, which brings the spindle down, which brings the case into contact with the cutter down here at the bottom. Okay. And then you have a shaving collector that collects all the shavings from your cutting operation. That, in a nutshell, are the components of the trimming section of the Power Case Prep Center. We'll talk about each of these in detail in a little bit. Down at the bottom, you have 6 attachment points for your case prep tools: chamfering, deburring, and private pocket cleaning, reaming, and so on. Again, we'll talk about each of these in more detail in just a few minutes. On the back of the Power Case Prep Center, you'll see the lock knob. The lock knob is used to lock the carrier in place. Once you've got the adjustment just right, so your cases are exactly the appropriate length, you can tighten the lock knob and lock that carrier in place, and then you're ready to start trimming. Below that, you'll find the black case here with the motor. It's a high torque, low speed motor in there. Also has a transformer in there, so you actually have a regular power cord instead of a power adapter that you plug directly into the wall. Your on-off switch is right here. That turns on both the cutter on the trimming section and your case prep tools in the bottom. When you first take the Case Prep Center out of the box, and before you start using it, you need to check the adjustment of your adjustment handle. What I found with mine is that it was out of adjustment just a little bit, and made it almost impossible to adjust the case length properly. It drove me crazy until I figured out what was happening. Now, when you turn this adjustment handle, it's supposed to move this plate up and down. For instance, if I turn it clockwise, you'll see this plate move up. I hope you can see that on the video. When I turn it the other way, though, look what happens. I'm turning, but nothing's happening. There's this dead space. I have to turn it almost a full turn before it starts adjusting it back down. So this dead space happens. Also, if you look right here, the handle lifts up from the frame of the Case Prep Center, and until I get to a certain point, it won't adjust. And then when I go the other direction, it has to go all the way down till it touches the frame of the Case Prep Center before this thing will start to adjust. Okay. Also, a good way to check is to turn counterclockwise and then push down on the handle. If it's able to move like that, that means your handle is way out of adjustment. Okay? So, the way to fix that is to turn the handle counterclockwise until all the dead space is taken up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one hand to hold the bottom of this bolt here up. Then I'm going to move it around to where I can get to the set screw on the handle. This is a 3/32 inch set screw, or hex key. I'm going to loosen that up, and I'm going to push the handle down so that it's in contact with the frame of the case prep center. Then, while still holding this bolt up, I'm going to tighten the set screw. Get it on there nice and tight so it doesn't come loose again. Now, if we watch, when I start turning it clockwise, it'll start moving the plate up immediately. As soon as I start turning counterclockwise, it starts moving the plate down. There's no dead space. All that dead space has been taken up. And the reason that dead space exists is because the handle is up too far on the bolt shaft that makes the adjustment. Okay? So, before you start using it, as soon as it comes out of the box, check the adjustment of your handle. And check it, periodically. It could come loose, so check it periodically. Anytime I start to use the case prep center, I check that first. Now, another thing about the case prep center, one thing that I do not like, is this adjustment knob. In the instructions, or I'm sorry, the lock knob. In the instructions, it tells you to turn the lock knob, or to loosen the lock knob by half a turn in order to start making adjustments. Well, watch what happens when I turn it half a turn. Watch this plate here. Turn half a turn. See how the plate kind of moved forward just a little bit? It's actually loose on there now. Okay, and that's not even a full half a turn that I just turned it. Okay, making adjustments like this, when I turn the handle, see this thing is just wobbling all over the place. It's not possible to get a decent adjustment when that thing's wobbling like that. So what you do, instead of loosening the lock knob by half a turn, just do it about 1/8 of a turn, maybe even a little bit less. That makes it so you can adjust it, and it's nice and smooth. No wobbling. Now I can get micro adjustments out of it, or thousandths of an inch adjustments out of it properly. Okay? If it's too loose and that thing falls forward like that, there's no way I can adjust it properly with it wobbling around like that. Okay? So, anytime you make adjustments, make sure you don't, ignore the instructions. Ignore the instructions. Make sure you don't turn this more than maybe 1/8 of a turn. Once you've got it adjusted properly, then you can tighten it down, and that locks this plate into position. You can start trimming cases. Okay? Two important things to know before you start using it. One other thing I would highly recommend you do before you start using your case prep center is to use a fine point Sharpie or a pen or something with a very fine tip on it. Put a line right here next to the base of the adjustment handle. Now if you look at the base of the handle here, you'll see these ridges. Each ridge represents 1/1000th of an inch adjustment. But for some bizarre reason, Hornady neglected to machine a small line in there in the top of the frame to use as a guide. So with that line on there, I can easily move from one ridge to the next and get a 1/1000th inch adjustment. If I go clockwise by one ridge, that makes my case length 1/1000th of an inch longer. If I go counterclockwise, it adjusts it 1/1000th of an inch shorter. So, don't know why Hornady didn't put a line there to use as a guide. They have those nice little ridges on here, and they even tell you in the manual that each ridge represents 1/1000th of an inch. So, highly recommend you do that. It'll make your case trimming a lot easier, a lot more precise. So, when we're ready to sit down for a session of case trimming, there's 4 things that we need to do. We need to install a shell holder at the bottom of the cam lock device. We need to adjust the lock arm so that it locks properly. We need to install our trimmer pilot into the cutter, and we need to adjust the case length. So we'll install the shell holder first. The bottom of the cam lock device is what's called a plunger. What we'll do is we'll take the appropriate shell holder, since I'm doing 223, that's shell holder number 16, and I'm going to put the shell holder over this shaft, so the hole in the shell holder goes over the shaft in the plunger. Then I install the whole assembly back into the cam lock device. Now, I need to adjust the lock handle so that it locks when the handle gets right about here and unlocks when the handle is right about there. So let's put a case in. I'm going to turn the lock handle this way, and I find that I go as far as I can and the case is still not locked. So what I need to do is adjust the spindle and kind of rotate it so that the lock handle ends up right around this area when the case is locked. The way you do that is you remove the spindle lock nut or lock bolt. Here, there's 2 holes for the spindle lock bolt. The top hole is for when using longer cases like a rifle cartridge, and the bottom hole is for using shorter cartridges like if you're loading pistol or trimming pistol cases. So since we're using rifle cases, I'll be using the top hole here. Now, the center of the spindle is hexagonal shaped. The spindle lock bolt goes into the side of the spindle carrier here, and this shaft will rest against one of the flat sides of that hexagonal portion of the spindle, and that keeps the spindle from spinning around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the spindle. I'm going to use the spindle stop nut here and hold the cam lock device and turn the spindle this way. Then I'm going to use the spindle stop nut to keep the spindle from rotating, and I'm going to attempt to lock the case. Still not quite there. Let me rotate a little bit further. Turn it until I can get the case locked. Okay, right there. The case is locked in the cam lock device. Now I'm going to move the handle about where I want it when the case is locked. So right about there. And then I'm going to reinstall the spindle lock nut. Now if it doesn't go in, you may need to rotate the spindle ever so slightly so that a flat part of the hexagonal portion of the spindle is facing the shaft here. Let me go the other direction here. There we go. Now again, I'm using the top hole since I'm trimming rifle cases. The bottom hole is for pistol cases. Now, there the case is locked. Turn a quarter turn to unlock the case. Now I'm going to adjust my shell holder here so that the opening is toward the front. So when it's unlocked, I can insert and remove the case directly from the front. So we put a case in, quarter turn, case is locked, quarter turn that way, case is unlocked. Okay? So we've got our shell holder in, we've got our spindle or our cam lock handle adjusted properly. The next step, we need to put a trimmer pilot in. Now for 223, trimmer pilot number 1 is the appropriate pilot. I'm going to remove the shaving collection tray here so I can get at the set screw that's at the base of the cutter right here. Now this is a 5/64 inch set screw, so I'm using a 5/64 inch hex key. To loosen it, I put my trimmer pilot in and then tighten it back up. Doesn't have to be real tight, just snugged up enough so that it doesn't turn. Now, the last step, of course, is adjusting the trimmer so that it will trim our cases to the appropriate length. Now, for 223, the trim length is 1.750 inches. So let's take a look at where we're at. This case is 1.767. Remember, when you measure cases with a caliper, to rotate the case slightly so you get the lowest number you can on the caliper here, so that it's not crooked in the caliper. It needs to be square on both sides. So 1.767. I'll put the case in. I'm going to lock it, and I'm going to bring the case down. Let me adjust the spindle carrier up. Now I'm going to turn the adjustment handle counterclockwise and lower the case down onto the cutter, so the case is just touching the cutter. Right about there. So, since our case started out at 1.767 inches, we've basically adjusted our power case prep center to trim cases down to 1.767. So I'm going to replace my shaving collection tray here, and I'm going to adjust it down about 14 thousandths. I don't want to go all the way just yet. I want to go in increments so that I don't go too short. You can always trim a little bit more off the case, but once you've gone too short, you can't add any to the case. So I'm just going to go down about that far and see where that takes me. Okay. Should be around 1.754 or thereabouts. Yeah, 1.752. So I got pretty close. So I'm going to adjust it down another thousandth. And try again. One of the advantages of having the case pointed down like that is that there's no chance of shavings getting inside the case. Everything falls straight down. With some trimmers, especially the lathe style trimmers where the case is horizontal, it's possible for shavings to get inside the case. I still tap it a little to make sure that nothing got in there, but I like it being vertical like that. .75. 2. Let me go down just a little bit more. Get it in there. Come on, there you go. I'm going to go down another thousandths here. Do it very slowly when I'm closing in on the desired length so I don't overshoot. .751. Just a little bit more and I will have it adjusted. .750 and a half. Figures. Half a thousandth there. Didn't quite go far enough. Allows you to do very precise adjustments, so even when I'm within a thousandth of an inch, I can get very, very close. And here we are. 1.750. Good deal. Now, make sure that's locked down tight so the carrier doesn't move. And once I've adjusted it, I always do one more before I start a trimming session, just to make sure that I'm adjusted to exactly the right length. I also like to chamfer and deburr the case when I measure, just to make sure I don't have a burr or something sticking up off the top of the neck that's affecting my measurements. And there it is, 1.750. Very good. So, at this point we're ready for a trimming session. I can trim and then use the bottom here, the case prep tools, to chamfer, deburr, clean out the primer pocket, ream it out, and so on. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. One thing I did want to mention before we move on from the trimming portion of the power case prep center, remember I told you that the bottom hole is used for pistol. Now, in order to set it up for pistol, the hexagonal portion of the spindle shaft comes down just below the top hole here. So in order to get the spindle lock bolts in here for pistol, I have to actually pull the handle down just a little bit until that hexagonal portion of the spindle is over that lower hole. And you'll notice what that does when I put the lock bolt back in is the handle's a little bit lower, the cam lock portion of the spindle is a little bit lower, so it lowers the whole thing and puts a shorter distance between the cutter and the shell holder. That way you have enough space to or enough throw to get it down to the cutter. If the handle were in, or if the lock bolt were in the top hole, then the handle may not bring the shell holder down far enough to get a short case down to the cutter. I mean, you'd have to adjust it quite a bit down with the adjustment handle. So for pistols, bring the handle down a little bit, then put your lock bolt in, and that'll lower the handle, lower the spindle, and everything's ready to go. Okay. Let's take a look at the lower portion of the case prep center. There are 6 attachment points for your case prep tools, such as your chamfer, deburr tools, primer pocket cleaner, reamer, and so on. These are set up for tools that are threaded 832, which is standard size. Hornady themselves make about 18 or 19 different tools that'll fit into these attachment points, but any manufacturer's tool will work. As long as it's threaded for 832, it'll work just fine. Down at the bottom is another shaving collector tray, which you can pop off and empty out and pop it back on. Now, you can set these up any way that you want, whatever order you want to do your case preparation in. I'll show you the way that I do it. Your mileage may vary. Now at the top, I use the chamfer and deburr tools. Hornady makes 2 different sizes. For example, this is a standard size deburr tool, and they also make one for large caliber. If you're loading for 50 cal, you may want to use the larger deburr tool. They also have a very large chamfer tool, but these are 223 cases. I'll just use the normal sizes here. I put my chamfer tool on the top left. I found it's easy to just turn the machine on here and allow it to screw itself in. Have to be careful though once it's screwed all the way in. Some of these things are very sharp, so be careful not to cut yourself. So I have chamfer and deburr on the top. Next, I'll put my primer pocket cleaner. Now, of course, there's 3 different pieces or tools for the primer pocket. There's the cleaner, the reamer, and the uniformer. So, and they make them in both for small primers and for large primers. So I'm going to put my cleaner in next, in the middle left. And on the middle right, I put my primer pocket reamer. Now, let me just mention something about the reamer here. The reamer is designed to get rid of the military crimp that's on military brass, or the primer pocket crimp that's on military brass. Now, it's designed specifically for that purpose, and it's shaped so that it doesn't go in too far into the primer pocket and end up beveling the edges or around the primer pocket. I've seen some reloaders, in fact I watched a YouTube video just recently, where a guy actually used the chamfer tool to ream the crimp out of his primer pockets. Now that's a bad thing to do. The chamfer tool will start cutting that primer pocket or around the edge of the primer pocket as long as you hold that thing on there. And what you end up doing is creating a bevel around the edge of your primer pocket. And what that does is number one, it gives you less material to hold the primer in. It also gives the debris and oils and things an entry point, an easier entry point into the primer pocket, so that it could get in there and foul your powder, or get other materials in there that shouldn't be there. So do not use the chamfer tool to ream your primer pocket. Use the right tool for the job, a primer pocket reamer. Okay? So I'll put that in the middle right. Now, next, on the bottom left, I use my primer pocket uniforming tool. Now, before I put it on there, I need to adjust it. This collet that's around it moves up and down. It's got a set screw on there to lock it in place. But what you want to do is put a cartridge on, or a case on there that has the primer pocket already cleaned out and at the right depth. Put that on there. Loosen the set screw. This is a 1/16 inch set screw on this particular one. If you have one from a different manufacturer, it may be a different size. What I'm going to do is, while holding the case down on the uniforming tool, I'm going to bring the collet up to the bottom of the case and then tighten it down. What that'll do is it'll set my depth for my uniformer, so that all my primer pockets end up at the same depth. Okay? So I put that one on the bottom right. It also has a lock bolt on there that you can tighten, but it's usually not necessary. Then on the bottom right, I put my case neck brush. Now, regardless of what your setup is or how you like to set yours up, I highly recommend you put your brush on the bottom. If it's up here and it's sticking way out this long, it can get in the way when you're trying to use the other tools. So I always put mine on the bottom. Okay. So once I've trimmed the case, I pop it out of the cam lock, chamfer, deburr, and let me just mention another thing about chamfering and deburring. All you have to do is hold the case up to the chamfer tool and let it do the work. Don't jam it on there. You're not trying to create a sharp edge on the neck here. All you want to do is get rid of any burrs or that sort of thing that the trimming process creates. Don't push it in there real hard. Just do it enough You just hold it there and let the tool do the work. You shouldn't have to be pushing very hard at all on there. It'll get all of the burrs and snags off of there just fine, just by holding it up there. And I turn around, clean my pocket. As you can see, it does a pretty nice job. The one on the left is cleaned. The one on the right is not. So hopefully you can see that on the video, how big a difference there is with that. Then I use the Reamer. This particular brass is not military brass, so not really necessary, but it helps to make my primer pockets all a uniform diameter. And the uniformer, and I turn it around, run it through the case neck brush, go in and out a few times, and I'm done. I've got a piece of brass here that's ready to be reloaded. And I've only had to handle this piece of brass one time. I've trimmed it, deburred it, chamfered it, cleaned the primer pocket, cleaned out the neck, everything done, only having to handle the brass one time. And it's ready to go. With other tools, things are broken up into separate processes. For example, trimming is usually separated from case preparation. So I have to trim it. I trim 50 or 100 cases, or however many I'm doing in that session. Then I go through and I chamfer and deburr, and I may have to even go through a third iteration where I do the primer pockets on a separate session. Now, for example, the Hornady Case Prep Trio tool only has 3 of these attachment points. So what I do is I have chamfer, deburr, and my case neck cleaner in the 3 attachment points, run through that process, and then I'll, for all 50 or 100 rounds, however many I'm doing, and then I'll change out the 3 tools to my 3 primer pocket tools. And then I have to go through the session a third time. With the Power Case Prep Center, everything's done all in one sitting, or all in one handling of a particular piece of brass. Trim, neck issues, primer issues, and I'm done. That piece of brass is ready to be reloaded. Okay. So that completes my examination of the Hornady Power Case Prep Center. All in all, I think it's a great tool. Takes a little practice, a little getting used to, but once you've mastered it, it makes case trimming and preparation a breeze. You can do thousands of cases in a fairly quick session. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you've learned a little bit, and if you liked it, please click the like button and maybe even subscribe to my channel. I'll be putting out more videos soon. Thanks for watching. Happy reloading.